Hi, my name's Jay Robbins. This is video number 7 in a series explaining the Texas residential contract, specifically the 1 to 4 family residential contract. This is a really interesting paragraph, and we spend a lot of time on this paragraph after we get under a contract because it talks about repairs. But the number one question and issue that comes up is this property condition. There are only two options. The property is as is, or the property is subject to certain repairs and treatments. Almost always, almost 100% of the time when we sign a contract, it says that the contract is as is. Well, what does that mean, and why is this so scary? Well, as a buyer, you can imagine you're putting up earnest money, you've committed to buy a property, and you come across this paragraph and it says you're buying the house as is. And you think, what if it has a bad roof, a bad foundation? What if the air conditioner doesn't work? What if the pool is leaking? All of these things, and I've accepted the property as is. Well, you don't have to worry, because if you have a good realtor, they have negotiated for you what is called an option period. It's built right into the contract, paragraph 23, and I've got a whole video about that. But the option period is going to give you, as the buyer, the right to inspect the property, and you'll see right here in the contract it says that the buyer has the right to have access to the property for inspections at reasonable times. So as a buyer, you can inspect the property, and again, if you have a good realtor helping you, then you have a built-in mechanism that you can back out of the contract for any reason, but especially if you find something during your course of inspections that you don't like. So, how does it work? Usually you have 7 to 10 days, something like that. You can inspect the property and something will almost always come up. It may have an old roof, an air conditioner that doesn't work, some of those examples I gave before. As long as you're doing this within your option period and you still have the right to back out, you can go to the seller and you can renegotiate if there are some issues with the property that you're not willing to accept. As a seller, you should also pay attention to this contract and don't get too hung up on the as is part of the contract, because there are probably some problems with your property that you didn't know about that a reasonable buyer may ask for. For example, anything to do with roof, plumbing, foundation, electrical, HVAC, certain appliances, mold, termite, those are the sorts of things that you can expect a buyer to ask for consideration or repairs if they find these items. There are also additional protections in the contract for the buyer if the property has repairs that are required by the lender. So, as a buyer, typically you're going to have a mortgage and the mortgage company will send an appraiser to the property. If the appraiser finds problems with the property that he thinks might be a problem for the bank, the appraiser will note it in the appraisal, and you may not be able to buy the house unless those repairs are made. That is an additional protection for a buyer in the typical contract. Of course, a good realtor is going to help you navigate all of this. I just want to make sure that if you're watching this as a buyer and you see the as is clause in the contract, don't get too worried about it. And as a seller, when you see that as is clause in the contract, you can expect that if there's some serious problems with the property, the buyer may come back and ask you for some consideration or repairs. And if you don't come to some sort of reasonable agreement, the buyer might back out. Okay, so what happens if the buyer and seller agree that repairs will be made? What does the contract say? The contract says that the repairs will be made prior to closing. And this is really important. It says that the seller will hire professionals to make those repairs or get those repairs completed. It also says if a license is required, they will hire a licensed professional. So this is really important. It seems obvious on some things. For example, a foundation, I think you're probably going to want to hire somebody that's a professional foundation company. An air conditioning company, it probably makes sense to most people watching this video that you would hire a licensed HVAC technician to fix the AC. Now, there could be some other things that are a little less clear. For example, if the buyer and seller agree that you're going to fix that back door that sticks and the lock doesn't latch properly, a lot of sellers feel really competent and comfortable making that repair themselves, but the contract says unless the buyer and seller agree, a professional has to be hired to make that repair. So even a repair as simple as replacing a doorknob or fixing a lock, that has to be done by a professional unless otherwise agreed. Now, I want to point out something here that the contract does not say. It does not say that the seller will provide receipts or invoices. So that's really important to note, because we have run into this situation before where the seller made the repairs, but they hired their buddy, who's a licensed HVAC technician, to come out and make the repairs. He did it as a favor. They paid him a little bit to do it on the side. He's licensed, but he didn't provide an invoice. That's legit as far as the contract goes today. So if you're a buyer and you want to make sure you see invoices, make sure to write that into the contract. If you're a seller, make sure that if you want to do any repairs, you get agreement from the buyer in advance. I hope this cleared up any questions you have about repairs. I know this can be a really sticky one, so if you have any crazy stories about repairs, I'd love to see it in the comments below. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call. I'm always available at 214-444-9014. Next up in our videos, we're going to talk about the residential service contract, also known as a home warranty. I'll see you in just a minute.